follow up on our discussion. I think we have a lot of business left, because here, let me clarify some of the remaining issues. The main purpose of Chapter 3, okay, the Chapter 3 is to give you a broad understanding of the global LNG industry, global natural gas market, but then the global LNG market, right? Natural gas market bigger than LNG market, right? Although LNG market is more important than general natural gas market. So the purpose of this chapter is to give you a broad outline of the global LNG industry, particularly LNG industry in NEA, Northeast Asia. That was the main purpose. Then, to link this to shale gas developments in the United States and Canada, North America, right? Then the impact of North American shale gas development on the global LNG industry, that's the logic. And LNG industry in Northeast Asia. Then another thing you have to remember is that, the kinds of discussions about energy security issues broadly and shale gas issues in particular, the way they discuss it is, first, we need to know what's going on in the United States and in Canada first, right? Shale gas development. Then second, the impact of it, right? The impact. Let me summarize it. In terms of the impact of North American shale gas, there are four aspects. Okay, four aspects. Let me clarify. Number one, the impact of shale gas developments on the general global natural gas market and global LNG industry. That's one. Okay, so this requires some understanding of global LNG industry. Okay, some understanding. Who are exporters, who are importers, the size of trading, right? Whether it is expanding or narrowing, or the practice of contractual practice, right? It's shifting from long-term contracts to short-term contracts, pricing mechanism. This was what we did last class, right? Pricing mechanism, more important, flexibility, liquidity. So the market as a whole moving from rigidity to flexibility and liquidity. So that as a whole, the global LNG industry is becoming a unified global market. And LNG, natural gas, becomes a commodity, right? So this was what we were doing last class. So the impact first on the global LNG market, right? Second, in terms of the impact, the second impact will be about economic impact, right? Economic impact, meaning the shale gas economic impact means industrial impact, right? We got into this, industrial impact. I called it shale revolution is an industrial revolution, because the impact on the industry, global industry, is so enormous, right? Some industries are benefiting from shale revolution. The two most important industries that benefit most from shale revolution will be steel industry, chemical industry. Because steel industry, chemical industry, they benefit most because feedstock from gas processing, right? So because of shale revolution, steel and chemical industries will be provided new, cheaper feedstock from gas, not oil. Right? Cheaper feedstock for steel and chemical industry. And American steel and chemical industries are gaining in competitiveness because these American industries will be provided much cheaper compared to Europe, compared to Asia. So manufacturing industry is coming back to the United States. And some European industries are relocating. Japanese, steel industry relocating. Particularly in Texas, in the state of Texas, Louisiana. Those sort of processing center in America. Right? So a lot of investment is made now in those areas, which is good news for America. And second, in terms of industrial revolution, not only for steel and chemical that uses feedstock as natural gas, but general manufacturing industries, okay? They get also a competitive edge, right? So general manufacturing industries are getting much more competitive. So this is industrial revolution. So these are economic benefits. And job creation, right? Job creation. There are reports that study, how many jobs are created in America. And if you go to CSIS website, they have publication that looks into, state by state breakdown of how many jobs are created in some states. CSIS, Brookings, you can read those reports by these think tanks. So you know how Americans are so excited about this, right? Now, that's economic impacts, okay? Economic impact. Third, security, geopolitical impact, geopolitics impacts. That's third impact, geopolitics. Geopolitics, how international relations among countries change after shale gas. That's the issue. Geopolitics. The first thing that might come to your mind will be Russian influence goes down. That's the first thing that might come to your mind, right? Russian influence goes down. And what will happen in Europe and in Asia? These are two separate, areas of geopolitics. Clearly, the first thing, most immediate impact will be felt in Europe. Russia loses gas power against European countries because LNG is eroding Russian pipeline supply. Cheaper LNG is provided to European countries beginning 2009, right? Then that is eroding Gazprom sales to European countries. And I showed you some maps where Gazprom loses how much money, portion of Gazprom, losses to LNG sales to European countries. So that Russian, gas export plan changes, right? Russian Gazprom export plans change. 2009, November 2009, Russian, what was the name of the plan? 2009, Russian gas export plan, right? What was the name of the plan? Which announces, future gas exports, more gas exports to the Asia Pacific countries. No, there was a specific name of the document. Blueprint. What was the name of the blueprint? That came out November 2009. the document name, blueprint name, by which Russia will increase gas exports and oil exports to Asia by 2030, right? Oil exports, 25%. Gas exports, 20% by 2030, right? But the current level of Russian exports, oil exports, gas exports to the Asia-Pacific countries, hovering around, 4%, 5%. Korea is the biggest importer, 8%, 9%. But Russia, their claim is to expand it to 20%, 25% by 2030, because they are losing market in Europe. So they are moving to the Asia-Pacific. So that's shale impact. And geopolitical side, Russia loses power in Europe, right? Trying to strengthen Russian presence in the Asia-Pacific to make up for the loss in Europe. That's geopolitical impact. So geopolitical impact due to shale gas is stronger in Europe than in Asia, right? More immediate in Europe, because that happened right after shale revolution, 2009. But in Asia, we haven't got into geopolitics of shale gas in Asia, in the Asia-Pacific. Asia-Pacific, slow, not as strongly felt as in Europe. American debate on shale impact on geopolitics in Europe is that America was able to improve energy security in Europe enormously. That was their assessment. But Asia, slow, not as evident as in Europe, okay? Because still Russian presence here is on the rise in the Asia-Pacific, okay? Russian presence here, I mean mostly, Russian presence meaning mostly energy presence. Russia was increasing exports right up to the shale exports, right? To Korea, to Japan, to China. All these three countries. Right before 2009, Russia was expanding gas exports, right? Korea, the famous, right, Russia-Korea pipeline project through North Korea. That began 2011, right? Russian-Korean pipeline discussion began August 2011, okay? Although the current fate of Russia-Korean pipeline, PNG project, is delayed, is being delayed. That's geopolitical impact here. After shale gas hit the Asia-Pacific region, the immediate impact here was the delay of Russian-Korean PNG negotiation. It had stopped, okay? Although, I mean, North Korea became much more aggressive, that was, the first reason, but shale also was also a factor behind that delay, Russian-Korean pipeline delay. How about Russia-China relation? Russia-China relation, again, the biggest market for Russian natural gas is China, right? But the problem is, Russia wants to sell natural gas to China, but China doesn't want to import, because China has many different sources of imports, right? China has LNG sources, China has PNG sources from Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Myanmar pipeline from the south that opened last year. July 2013, China began to import even from Myanmar, right? So China has different sources. So Russia wants to sell, but China is not in a hurry. And China is asking for cheaper prices for natural gas. $100 gap in what Russia is asking for, what China is wanting. $100 gap. So because of this natural gas pricing gap, Russia-China natural gas negotiation has gone for 15 years, but no final negotiation. Right? No deal between these two countries for 15 years because of this pricing gap. Pricing gap. So Russia-China relation after shale gas, how this will go, we need to closely watch. But as of now, the impact not strongly felt on Russia-China. Right? Even after shale gas, Russia-China may be becoming a little bit closer because China, from Chinese perspective, China is being blocked from American technology, right? So China is waiting to see whether they can get shale gas technology from the United States. When America blocks it, China goes to Russia. Okay? So this is the current situation. Okay? So no decision has been made from the America on shale gas technology. We have to see what will happen between Russia-China, between China-America. Right? This is highly strategic, geopolitical. This is something that we need to look closely in the future in terms of shale gas geopolitical impact. Japan. Japan is an interesting country. If you look at the geography of Japan, right? Japan is as vulnerable as Korea in terms of energy imports, right? Almost 100% LNG dependence. But the only outlet for Japan is Russia. The only outlet. Russia provides some diversification for Japan, right? But Japan is worried about, Russia too close to China or moving too close to Korea so that nothing left for Japan. That's Japanese concerns, right? So Japan was so nervous about when Putin approaching Korea, building Korean pipeline. But after the Korean pipeline was delayed, Japan approached Russia again. Okay? Then discussed various projects, okay, between Russia and Japan. Again, Russia-Japan, we need to look very closely. And by nature, Russia divides and rules among Korea, China, Japan. Right? The best scenario is Russia providing natural gas and oil to every country, China, Korea, Japan. That's the best scenario. But in terms of energy resource amount and politics, all three countries benefit from Russian energy at the same time? Impossible. Right? Russia knows that. So Russia divides and rules between these three countries, although China is the biggest market. Right? That's the situation. So shale gas somehow has impact on this Russia versus China, Korea, Japan. That's that. That's geopolitics. Right? The final aspect in terms of impact is environmental impact. Environmental impact. The David Victor, the author of Chapter 3, he says that economic, environmental impacts are clear and geopolitical impacts are unclear. That's his conclusion. Right? Economically, shale gas benefits are clear. environmentally, shale gas benefits are clear, but geopolitically, he doesn't know where geopolitics will evolve, right? That's what he said. Environmentally, unlike David Victor's view, again, a lot of uncertainty environmentally. That's what my readings indicate when I read different articles and reports. There is divisive views on the environment, right, regarding shale gas. Number one reason is that CO2 emissions decrease, but more harmful methane emission increase if you use natural gas. That's one uncertainty that is added by natural gas, shale gas consumption increase. So methane is a problem. That's one problem. Second, underground water contamination and other underground environmental contamination. That's second uncertainty added by natural gas. Shale gas extraction in and of itself contaminates underground water and sort of right? That's second uncertainty, environmental uncertainty. So technologically, for shale gas extraction to move on, you need to resolve these environmental problems, uncertainties, right? So government bodies, government agencies, and shale gas companies, they are sort of putting together research teams and still, studying a lot about these environmental impacts. And different outcomes come when companies research and when governments research. They issue totally different outcomes, right? Mostly the U.S. government is sort of their position is shale gas development is safe, right? Environmentally safe and clean, right? That's government position, right? And companies, yes, I mean they sort of try to give right. That same image, but NGOs are very critical about these shale gas development issues. So we need to again look closely about these environmental aspects. So these four, right? Global LNG industry, gas market changes, then geopolitics, economic impacts, and environment. These four aspects. So today we are going to go over some of the remaining issues. Just touch bases, like some of to help you understand better the global LNG market. Let's go over some of the stuff that left out from our last class. In terms of first, to understand global LNG industry, then several things I emphasized from last class. Number one, global LNG industry began to expand after 2006, right? After 2006, and it picked up dramatically 2011, right? The most ambitious country was Qatar, right? Qatar began to expand their exporting capacity after 2006, right? Then currently number one exporter, right? So this shows Qatar number one, 75 million ton, but red graph shows 2006 number, but 2006 very small. So this expansion, enormous expansion, occurred between 2006 2011. Right? Second exporter as of 2011 is Malaysia. Third, Indonesia. But Malaysia, Indonesia, you need to see here, different from Qatar. Right? Malaysia used to be number one. before 2006. Number one exporter. But Qatar took number one position. But after that, Malaysia, Indonesia, they are going down in terms of capacity. Right? The exporting capacity dramatically goes down because their domestic consumption growing. Right? Their economies grow. Right? They need much more natural gas. So there's not much left for export. Right? And if they have money, they can put that into exporting, terminal expansion, but they don't do it. So they remain as number two, number three, but soon I think import will exceed export for these two countries. Already, Indonesia already, right? Export bigger than import. I'm sorry, import bigger than export. Indonesia has become a net importer already. Malaysia will become a net importer soon. And these two countries are having a huge impact on Asia-Pacific LNG industry. Because Malaysia, Indonesia, they are important supplier to Asian countries, both to Japan and to Korea. The fact that they become net importer, meaning the Asian region as a whole, right? The supply is decreasing dramatically because of these two countries. So Asian region as a whole need to import natural gas from now on because of these two countries, Malaysia and Indonesia. Australia is an interesting country. Australia currently 20 million ton, which is much smaller than Qatar. And as a country, Australia, they have decided as a national agenda to expand their LNG exporting capacity by 2020. So their plan, if their plan materializes, by 2020, Australia will become bigger than Qatar. Maybe they become like this. So Australia is a huge, big variable in the future global LNG industry, right? Right. China, Australian relations. You need to look what happens between China and Australia. China-Australian relations revolve around these issues, gas export issues. Right? Australia try to appeal to China because they have to export natural gas to China because that's the biggest market. And their new investment to catching up with Qatar, mostly based on Chinese import. Right? Chinese import. So from Australian perspective, if China doesn't live up to Australian expectations, so for instance, China succeeds in shale gas revolution domestically, so that China doesn't need to import as much, right? Then that'll lead to huge loss for Australia. That's one of the worries from Australian perspective. And Australia has to compete, right? Compete with potential, no doubt with Qatar, right? But Qatar already big exporter, but the biggest competitor for Australia will be America. Biggest competitor. So Australia looking very closely into all these global shale developments, particularly from North America. Because the biggest competitor will be, where is America? Here, this one. US, Australia, two big competitors. And potentially Canada. Doesn't come up here, Canada. US, Canada, two big competitors to Australia. So the big question mark in terms of global LNG industry, this is a given. Qatar is a given. Qatar already, big. But the big variables in the future is how much Australia can export, how much the US can export, how much Canada, and Nigeria from Africa, already big one, quite big. Nigeria, Algeria, right? Algeria, biggest exporter to Europe, right? Algeria, Nigeria, already big. But there is one country that doesn't come up here, which is again even newer than the US, and is expected to very big in terms of export capacity. That is Mozambique, Tanzania, which doesn't show up here. That's the very latest event. Tanzania, Mozambique, they are big potential exporter here, like this much. So the future big players in the global LNG industry will be Australia, besides Qatar. Australia, they become small, right? Australia, then US, these two big players. And in conjunction with the US, Canada, then Mozambique, Tanzania. So these four, Australia, US, Canada, Mozambique, these four additional big players will change the global LNG industry as a supplier. So future global LNG industry will depend on how these four countries move. Investments are already done. Okay, investments are already done. But the problem is, these investors into these four new markets, new exporters, they have uncertainty, right? They have uncertainty because they are not sure about demand, right? Whether the investment, the return on Australian investment, right, must be realized through, right, smooth exports to the demand center. Demand center, China. Korea, Japan, almost sure. Those are sure markets. But China, not sure about China. Right? So this uncertainty regarding these additional supplies will persist. We don't know yet. So the investments, maybe in terms of maybe billions of dollars, maybe half of these investments might be realized. Only half, not all of it. Right? Not all of it. So this is important in deciding on the shape of future market, future supplier market. There is some consensus on by 2020, because everyone thinks that the market will be different by 2020. 2020 is an important period. 2020, the market will be different. So far, LNG market was supplier-driven market. Always supplier controlled the market, because always like a demand exceeded supply, right? That was the nature of the market. But by 2020, the market will be different because demand exceeds supply for the first time. That's kind of expectations. But like I said, there is no certainty in terms of whether the market will be really demand-driven market by 2020. Although many data suggest that there is huge increase in demand from China, India. Right? That's why they are making investment, looking toward those consumption increase. Right? They are investing, but returns on this investment, a lot of uncertainty. Right? So this is the best way of understanding global LNG industry. Russia is an interesting market. PNG, Russia is a PNG powerful country, but LNG very small. Very small, like LNG only 10 BCM. Do you know where this LNG, Russian LNG provided? Where Russian LNG sold? You will see. Next slide. Let's look at first who are importing LNG. Big first importer, Japan. 78 million ton, right? No doubt, number one. The biggest exporter to Japan, I think, is Malaysia or Indonesia. That's number one. Second, maybe Australia. But for China, Australia is number one exporter. For Korea, no, Saudi doesn't. For Korea, I have to see. Maybe Qatar for Korea. Qatar, then Malaysia, Indonesia. So China, Korea, Japan, they have different combinations. So Korea number two, UK, then comes, right? China still small, just 12 million ton. 12 million ton is like a, you know what, 10 BCM? 10 BCM is 7.5 million ton. That's the best way of remembering. 10 BCM, 7.5 million ton. So 12 million ton is like 15 BCM, almost 15 BCM. Right? BCM is usually day, per day. Million ton per year. So 10 BCM per day is equal to 7.5 million ton per year. So these are per year basis. US importer of LNG 5.9, right? Importer of LNG. From Qatar, Nigeria, America imports. But currently, no import, no LNG import, right? US doesn't import anymore. A lot from Canada through PNG, right? Still, natural gas still coming from Canada, but no LNG because they have enough from shale production. And if you read David Victor's, chapter, he says that, even by 2005, if you read EIA report projection as of 2005, they were predicting there will be huge LNG increase, import increase from the US. That's what they predicted. US imports maybe 5 or 6 BCM as of 2005, and this will be increasing to maybe 2-digit BCMs. That was wrong. So companies, they were building import facilities, right? From the, like Gulf of Mexico or East Coast, they were building import terminals, right? But they turned out to be wrong. And 2009, suddenly shale gas coming out, right, enormously, right? They didn't need to import this much, even this much. Then these import facilities changed into export facilities. Government didn't expect it. Because government didn't control the market. Because these small shale gas companies, they led the revolution. Government didn't expect it. And government recognized it later and changed the figures, changed the policy. Right? So there is no signal from the government. It's purely company-led revolution. Now, look at this. This is a very interesting table. I like this table. This table is from International Gas Union. International Gas Union, as a global organization, they publish annual report on LNG industry. I took this from a report from 2011, International Gas Union, IGU. It is available from a website, 2011. If you look at this table shows which country imports, exports, how much LNG. Do you want to look at Russia? Let's look at Russia first. This is exporting axis, Russia. Russia doesn't export much LNG. PNG a lot, but LNG, Russia is a new player in the LNG industry, right? So let's look at how, to which country Russia exports. Russia exports 0.24 BCM of LNG to China. Where? From where?
Far East.
Far East? Right. I mean, if you look at the map, there is no place where Russia can provide LNG to China if not from the Pacific coast, right? Pacific coast, you have like a Vladivostok, right? That side. Then you have Sakhalin, Russian island Sakhalin. Sakhalin, they produce natural gas, right? And Sakhalin, according to new Russian LNG plan, because Russia realized the importance of LNG, they tried to enter the market. In 2009, Russia opened LNG exporting facility. The southern tip of Sakhalin. Southern tip of Sakhalin. And Sakhalin, there is a natural gas production site, several places. And they produce it, then moving to this southern tip of exporting terminal. Then they export it from there to China, to Japan, to Korea. So China, Korea, Japan, they began to import LNG from Russia for the first time since 2009 from Sakhalin, right? So this is through Sakhalin to China, very small amount, but much bigger amount to Japan, 7 BCM, because Sakhalin, Japan, very close, very close. So 7 BCM provided to Japan. This will be how much portion of Japanese imports? Japan imports maybe like it's 75 million ton per year. Then how much in BCM? 7.5 million ton is 10 BCM. Then 75 million ton is how much BCM? Japanese total import 75 million ton per year, right? That is how much in BCM per day? 100 BCM, right? 100 BCM. So if Japan imports from Russia 7.18 BCM, which equivalent to maybe 7 or 8% of Japanese imports. But Russian goal is 20%. Right? According to that 2030 document, Russia tries to expand, tries to account for 20% for each market in the Asia Pacific, China, Japan, Korea. But Japan, 2011, already about 8%, right, from Russia. So this is success for Russia. They enter the Japanese market, natural gas market, through Sakhalin export. Korea 2.82. Again from Sakhalin for the first time. Korea imports how much? Korea imports?
Almost 3.
35 million ton, which is 36 million ton, which is how much in BCM per day? 36 million ton per year. Then how much BCM per day for Korea? So Korea consumes about half. How much in BCM? 50? Yeah, 50 BCM. Let's say 50 BCM. 1 million ton? In BCM. You have to calculate. 7.5 million ton is 10 BCM. Then 1 million ton is how much? Maybe 2 or 3 BCM? 1 million ton, 2 or 3 BCM per day. You know, 1 BCM, even 1 BCM is enormous amount. Billion cubic meter. 1 BCM, right? It's billion cubic meter. So Korea consumes every day, right? About 50 BCM, 50 billion cubic meter of natural gas. It's an enormous amount still, because it's billion cubic meter. Right? We're talking about billion, not million, billion. Right? So Russia began to enter Asian market, which is clear from this. Then other importers, Taiwan, very small. Again, it goes from Sakhalin through ship, goes to Taiwan. Then, what is this? Thailand. Again from Sakhalin. Sakhalin, ships go to Thailand. Right? So this is Russian LNG strategy. Although it's small, they want to develop it. Right? But their plan is now facing a huge challenge because the global LNG market is changing so rapidly. You know, Russian LNG, US LNG, let's discuss, which is more competitive. We are talking here about in terms of price, right? Sort of, in order to put it on the ship, right, you need to first extract it from the site, move it, right? Then the cost added, right? The first, I think site cost is most important. Who can dig it out from the site for cheaper cost? That determines the competitiveness. But Russia is losing the market because their fields, natural gas fields and extraction technique, all underdeveloped, so inefficient. So cost is higher than even US LNG, right? So then Russia, no hope for Russia. So from Russian perspective, they need to bring down the cost of extraction as low as possible. There may be some transportation added. Then they can erode the market, much bigger market, Korea, China, Japan, Thailand. But due to the size of LNG industry is expanding, the competition will be much more stiff in the future. I'm not sure whether Russia can stand it because, you know, the whole country is corrupted, right? So the extraction cost, you know, you need to think about additional cost because you need to give price to a lot of people, right? That undermines Russian competitiveness, energy industry, right? Let's look at the U.S. You know what? The U.S. give some LNG supply here and there already, 2011. They give some to Brazil, right? Very small amount. And Chile, even China, right? Already. Qatar, no doubt. Qatar, most, right? I mean, extensive connection to most importers. Most importers. The biggest importer will be, from Qatar perspective, Japan, then Korea. Right? Japan, Korea, the biggest importer for Qatar. And who are these? UK. So from Qatar perspective, Qatar is in the middle, right? Then they look both ways. Then they look to the Asia Pacific market, then the European market. The distance must be almost similar. So Qatar can pick and choose from either one of these two markets. But what happened after shale revolution is that, Qatar, they cannot provide, LNG no longer to the United States, right? So they either provide European market or the Asia Pacific market, right? But first they provide it to the European market, right? Sort of diverted from the US, right? Diversion from the US market, additional LNG provided to the European market. And that sort of suppressed Russian PNG, right? But additional, like a ton of events. 2011, Fukushima, right? Fukushima happened, more LNG needed in Japan, right? And the price going up, LNG price going up in Japan. So Qatar, again, another diversion from the European market. So they would rather withdraw from, these volumes to European market than divert it to Japanese market. So pricing going up, less available to Europe. And European countries, they would rather use coal instead of natural gas. That's the current sort of situation. More coal consumption in Europe. And gas power plants, shutting down in Europe. More coal plants open. This is paradox of shale revolution in Europe, right? Okay, I think that, so you might want to go back to this table in terms of, right, who exports how much, who imports how much. Best source, this is best source. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Asian market, Asian LNG market. Before we talk about Asian LNG market, first look at this. This is how global LNG trade grows, as I mentioned. Global LNG trading grows, right? Like 2006, 2011, very important turning point. But between these 2 years, continued increase from 700 BCM to about 1,000 BCM. 1,000 BCM is 1 TCM, right? 1,000 BCM is 1 TCM. Do you know how much shale gas China has? 25 TCM. You can guess how much China has, right? Oh, I'm sorry. China, 36 TCM. 36 TCM, which means it's equivalent to 36 years of global LNG trading. That's how much China shale gas has. 36 years of current global LNG entire trading. US shale gas, 25 TCM. So the amount of US shale gas is equivalent to 25 years of global LNG trading. So 2011 global LNG trading, or the global natural gas trading, global natural gas trading 1 TCM. And 70% PNG, 30% LNG. Right? So global LNG trading 331 LNG BCM, which is an increase over, right, this much. Now, Asia Pacific. This is Asia Pacific breakdown. Again, 2006 is the turning point, the pickup, right, speed up period, 2006. China, again, BCM, right? Natural gas consumption, right? This is not trading. Natural gas consumption, right? Natural gas demand size. China 56, and 2011 131 BCM. But this is consumption amount. So where China, right, meet this consumption from which source? Domestic consumption, domestic production, or imports PNG or LNG, right? You need to think. This is entire consumption amount for China, which is a huge increase over previous years, right? So 5-year increase between 2006, 2006 is 15% increase. 5-year average increase. But it goes up. Between 2006, 2011, 18% increase. 5-year average increase. Annual increase. Right? Japan increase level is increase rate, speed, smaller, much smaller than China. Korea, again, increase rate, much smaller than China. That's Japan and Korea. India, China, they are the big consumers, right? This table shows most of future consumption will happen from China, India. This is evident from this table. Thailand is also potentially, right? Potentially big consumers. Indonesia, Malaysia, they are also big consumers, although they have, right, indigenous production. Let's look at LNG breakdown. This is LNG, not natural gas. LNG breakdown. This table shows LNG importance varies from country to country. To some countries, LNG is much more important than others. Most important, LNG is most important to Japan and Korea. Right? China, relatively small. LNG portion, relatively small. Right? Like I said, because China is diversified. Natural gas import sources are diversified, and they also have internal indigenous production. China was self-sufficient by mid-2000s, right? Self-sufficient from their domestic production. But the problem is domestic sources are drying up, and their consumption, domestic production cannot catch up with consumption, so that they began to import. And import sources, number one import source is PNG, pipeline. Not Russia. Not Russia. That's interesting. Russia, China, neighbors, right? And Russia has a lot of natural gas, but China doesn't import from Russia. That's an interesting phenomenon. Instead, China imports from Central Asia, right? And more recently, Myanmar, right? but not from Russia. Maybe in the future, but under some conditions. So this shows Japan biggest LNG import, 107, 2011. Korea half. So these two countries are biggest importers of LNG. They combine to account for almost 50% of global LNG import. Taiwan also big importers, but much smaller than Korea, 16. China, India, Taiwan, similar, 2011. So global LNG size 331, right? And out of 331, about 200 is traded in the Asia Pacific, right? 200, about two-thirds. Two-thirds are traded in the Asia Pacific, right? And year to year increase, China biggest, India biggest. This shows potential for future. India has biggest potential for consumption, LNG consumption. And China next. Although Korea, Japan, they will continue to be important LNG importers, but in terms of rate, increasing rate, smaller than China, India. So Japan, Korea, China, India. Right? These are groups. Right? China, India, next important groups. Global. This is global LNG, and this is Asia Pacific. Two-thirds LNG. But these are just sheer, numbers. We need to look at the rate. We need to consider rate. Right? These two countries will be more important in the future than Korea, Japan in terms of LNG market. Right? Japan, Korea, smaller in terms of rate. So China, India is key to LNG growth in this region. Let's look at Chinese natural gas market. There are many different figures about Chinese natural gas consumption. This is an important figure. Chinese future natural gas consumption level. Different organizations project, different figures. Like for instance, like IEA or Chinese, CNPC, NDRC, Chinese government, they all put different figures, projections for future Chinese natural gas consumption. At most, we have 600 BCM by 2035. More immediate important figure, 2020. 2030, right? We have only six years left by 2020. Right? LNG businessmen, these numbers are very important because LNG industry by nature, you need to invest much in advance, right? When you make investment, you need to look further down, like 10 years, 20 years. So this projection is so important, right? But projection is always projection, right? Right? No guarantee. So this Chinese figure, like I said, is so important in terms of profits. So by 2020, maybe 300 BCM average. 2030, 500 BCM. 2035, maybe 600. This is how much, increase. This is enormous amount. The current level is like 150, right? Current 150. The 150 becomes by 2020 300, right? Then again 2030 becomes 500. How do you meet this demand, right? This is global problem. Global problem. Right? Double by 2020, another double by 2030. Then where would you meet this demand, this much natural gas? Right? So if you look at this global LNG industry, it must be expanded enormously. We need a lot of investment, which shows that if you are a businessman, there is a golden opportunity there. If you plan ahead, you can make a lot of money if you use this well. That's what the Australian government are looking. Australian government knows this, right? So they want to make a lot of profits out of this, right? America saying, the U.S. businessmen saying, and Qatar, no doubt, they are already making money. And Mozambique, there was a huge discovery of natural gas. It's not shale, but it's natural gas from the sea. But it's conventional natural gas. It was found, discovered. The company that discovered this Mozambique natural gas, conventional natural gas, is Eni, Italian company. Italian company, just 2 or 3 years ago, they found it, but in conjunction with several other companies, including Korea Gas Corporation. So this conventional LNG will also be available to different countries, right? So problem is there are supplies. First, there is demand, huge consumption demand increase. Then how do you meet this demand, right? But the current infrastructure is still small, much smaller. Then let's put money into this, expand the facilities, then make money. That's what the businessman is thinking, right? A lot of money there, a lot of money. This is a table from Oxford Energy Institute. According to them, by 2020, Chinese natural gas consumption will be 400 BCM. According to Oxford Energy Institute, will be 400 BCM. And they break down this 400 BCM into several different supply categories. According to them, this 400, first conventional domestic production will be 220 from China. Almost half. Half can be supplied from China internally, conventional. Right? Then, these are unconventional. CBM, shale gas, these are unconventional. Right? Shale gas, 10 BCM by 2020 from China. CBM is another type of, much easier type of unconventional natural gas. So CBM is 30 BCM, shale gas 10 BCM. So domestic production 260. Conventional, unconventional. What is left is 140. 140 must be imported. Right? Then who exports to China? Turkmenistan will export 40. Current export 20, about 20, Turkmenistan. Myanmar began to export 2013, July 2013, 5 BCM currently, but will become 10. Russia, not at the moment, not 15, not 16, maybe 17.5 BCM. Russia begins to export by 2017. Even this is not certain. So by 2020, Russia will be exporting 15. Pipeline. This is LNG. Oh, sorry. This is pipeline, right? So 65 pipeline. PNG. Then the rest left to LNG. This is not for businessmen. This is state business, right? This is left to businessmen. So Australia and Tanzania and these people, American business, LNG businessmen, they are looking hard at this number. How much China still be importing LNG? 75 left for LNG by 2020. But if Chinese shale gas revolution speeds up, then China is able to 60 BCM by that time. Then much smaller left for LNG. There's so much left. So these two are most important. Shale gas, LNG. This is what the businessmen are really looking, these two. We need to, I think, next Tuesday, we need to finish up the 2 more PPTs. Then we'll shift to Tuesday. Monday. Monday we'll shift to chapter 4. Okay? Chapter 4, Monday.